brass key with a plastic tag marked Vault 42, Second National, would set off a chain of events that would destroy everything Aris Miller believed about his family. By evening, he would be fighting for his life. By tomorrow, he would learn that his mother, dead for 18 years, was alive in a basement cell, imprisoned by the two men he should have trusted most. 3 days earlier, on the morning his father's lawyer called about the estate, Aris had no idea any of this was coming. Aris sat on a velvet navy sofa, a mahogany watchbox open on his lap. The apartment was silent except for the metronome ticking of the wall clock. Sunday morning, overcast. The kind of light that made dust motes visible in the air, suspended like small witnesses to his private grief. He lifted the gold Rolex Submariner from its velvet cushion with his right hand. The watch felt heavy, though it weighed almost nothing. His father had worn this for 30 years, worn it to board meetings and family dinners, to the hospital during Aris's birth, to his own funeral. Well, not worn it there, but it had been there, in this box, waiting for someone to find it. Aris turned the watch over, studying the case back. The serial number was scratched from decades of use. He ran his thumb across the scratches, a texture map of his father's life. Then he noticed the velvet lining was loose at the corner. He hooked his index fingernail under the fabric and pulled upward. The adhesive had dried and hardened years ago. It tore with a soft, papery sound. Underneath, in a hollow space beneath the cushion, was a small brass key. His hand trembled slightly as he picked it up. It was cold. There was a plastic tag attached with clear tape. On the tag, Vault 42, Second National, was written in black permanent marker. The handwriting was his father's. Aris recognized it immediately. Shaky, the kind of handwriting someone produces when they're writing something they don't want to write. Aris pulled out his phone. The screen protector was cracked from an incident at the gym months ago. He opened the messaging app and began typing to his sister, Elena. Dad left something else? Meet me at the bank in an hour. He stood up and grabbed a black leather jacket from the armchair. The key went into his front pocket, and he patted it to make sure it was deep inside, secure. He looked at the framed photograph of his father on the mantel. John Miller, at 65, smiling at some charity gala, his arm around a woman Aris didn't recognize. Probably a business associate's wife. He didn't know then that he should have been looking at that photo differently, that there were secrets embedded in his father's smile. Elena paced near the marble columns of the bank lobby, her heels clicking against the polished stone floor. She wore a beige trench coat and gripped a designer handbag in both hands, her knuckles white with tension. Her eyes darted to the door every few seconds. When Aris arrived, she moved toward him immediately, her face tight with irritation. You're late. You said a secret inheritance? Aris, we're still processing the funeral. Her voice was sharp, stressed, the kind of voice people use when they're exhausted and trying not to show it. Aris opened his mouth to respond, to show her the key. But a man in a gray tracksuit stepped out from behind one of the marble pillars. He blocked their path to the vault elevator. His neck was thick, muscled like someone who had spent decades lifting weights or breaking things. A jagged scar ran down his chin, pale against his dark skin. The old man's debt didn't die with him, kids. Give me the key. The collector's voice was gravelly, the kind of voice that came from smoking unfiltered cigarettes and shouting at people. Aris's instinct was to ask who this man was, to say something that might diffuse the situation. Instead, his body moved. Later, he wouldn't remember deciding to do anything. He would only remember that the collector reached for his throat, and Aris ducked, slamming his left shoulder into the man's solar plexus. The impact was clean. The collector's breath exploded out of him. He staggered back, wheezing, his hand coming up to his ribs. "Get away from him!" Elena was screaming, swinging her heavy designer handbag in a desperate arc. She wasn't trained in anything but rage, and it showed. The handbag glanced off the collector's shoulder. He barely noticed. He recovered quickly. His right hand came up in a heavy hook aimed at Aris's head. Aris tried to slip it, but the punch caught him on the temple. For a moment, the world went white. He felt his head bounce off the marble pillar behind him, a dull, sickening thud that echoed through his skull. Through the fog, he saw his own blood beginning to drip down his face. The collector was turning back toward him. But Elena was still swinging, still screaming. It gave Aris the fraction of a second he needed. He kicked up and forward, driving his heel into the collector's knee. He felt something give way inside the joint, a sickening pop that made his stomach turn even as he was creating it. The collector collapsed, clutching his leg, yelling in pain that was suddenly real and urgent and animalistic. Aris grabbed Elena's hand and pulled her toward the elevator. "Inside now!" The doors were already closing, but he thrust his arm through and they slid open. He pulled Elena inside and jammed the button for the basement level. Through the narrowing gap, he could see the collector trying to crawl forward, his left leg dragging uselessly behind him. The doors shut with a pneumatic hiss. The basement levels of the bank hummed with the industrial sound of security systems and climate control. Aris inserted the brass key into the steel slot of box 42. He turned it with a metallic clack and slid the long metal drawer out onto the viewing table. Elena pulled out a stack of letters tied with a blue ribbon and a small, worn leather-bound journal. Her face began to pale. Her eyes widened. "These are Mom's. Dad told us all her things were lost in the fire." She whispered it, as though speaking too loudly might wake something in the basement that should stay sleeping. Aris opened one of the letters. The paper was yellowed, brittle at the edges. The ink had faded to a brownish hue. He read, "John, I can't stay. If you don't let me leave with the children, I will take the files to the police." His breathing slowed. The date on the letter was June 14th, 2005. The same day their mother had disappeared. The day their father said she had left them. The day he told the children that their mother had run away, that she didn't love them enough to stay. "She didn't leave us." Aris's voice sounded hollow, even to himself. He threatened her. He didn't lose his money in bad investments. He used it to hide her. Elena flipped to the back of the journal. A Polaroid fell out. The photograph showed a woman in a hospital gown, her face gaunt, her eyes empty. The date stamped on it was 3 years after their mother's supposed death. At the bottom of the gown was a logo, St. Jude's Sanitarium. Elena's hand went to her mouth. Aris stuffed the letters and journal into his inner jacket pocket. He looked up at the security camera in the corner of the vault room. Its red light blinked like a heartbeat. Someone paid that guy in the lobby to stop us. Dad's partners. They're still watching. Aris gripped the steering wheel of his old silver Honda. His knuckles were white. In the rearview mirror, he could see a black SUV with tinted windows trailing 2 car lengths behind them. The rain had started, and his wipers scraped back and forth across the windshield, leaving streaks of grime and city pollution. Elena looked back, her seatbelt strained across her chest. "Aris, they're still there." "I know." The SUV accelerated. Its engine roared like something hungry. It slammed into the Honda's rear bumper with a sickening crunch of metal. Glass shards from the taillight bounced and scattered across the asphalt behind them. "Aris, they're going to kill us!" Elena's scream was ragged. He shifted gears, downshifting hard, and jerked the wheel to the right. A parked delivery truck loomed in front of them. He missed it by inches, the side mirror cracking against the truck's corner panel. The SUV followed, swerving violently, and sparks flew from its side as it brushed the truck on the opposite side. The SUV pulled alongside them. Aris could see the passenger window rolling down. A masked figure emerged, holding a metal pipe. The figure swung, and the pipe connected with the passenger side window with a sound like the world breaking. Tempered glass exploded inward. The fragments rained down on Elena's lap, some sticking to her coat, others bouncing to the floor. She covered her head with her hands. Aris slammed the brakes. The SUV, unprepared for the sudden deceleration, shot forward. Aris whipped the wheel into a 180-degree turn. The tires smoked as they lost traction on the wet pavement. The car spun, and he felt the rear end drift wildly. For a moment, he thought they would flip. Then the wheels caught again, and he gunned the engine down a narrow one-way alley in the opposite direction. In the mirror, he saw the SUV skidding to a halt behind them, unable to make the turn. The alley closed in around them, brick walls on both sides, rain dripping from fire escapes above. Elena was breathing hard, pulling glass from her hair. "Where are we going?" "Somewhere we can think." Marcus Vane's law office occupied the top 3 floors of a downtown building. The receptionist knew them, or rather, knew of them. The Miller children, heirs to the Miller estate. She waved them through to the inner office without calling ahead. Marcus sat behind a gargantuan oak desk, swirling a glass of amber scotch. He wore a pinstripe suit and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Stacks of legal folders marked Miller Estate were arranged in neat piles on either side of his desk. "Children, you look like you've been through a war. Sit, please." His voice was smooth, the kind of smooth that comes from a lifetime of convincing people to do things they didn't want to do. Aris threw the journal onto Marcus's desk, sliding several legal papers across the polished wood. Marcus didn't look surprised. "You knew. You helped him hide her at St. Jude's. You sent those men to the bank." Aris's voice was accusatory, panting from adrenaline and injury. His bloody knuckles stained the white pages of the journal. Marcus sighed. He leaned forward and picked up a remote. He clicked a button. The office door locked with a heavy electronic thunk. The blinds began to close automatically, blocking out the city view. "Your father was a client. Trust is the foundation of my business. He paid me to ensure the family legacy remained untarnished. That includes your mother's delicate state." Marcus set the remote down carefully on the desk. "Your father had 3 children, you see. Sarah had a breakdown after the 3rd miscarriage. She became obsessed with the idea that your father was poisoning her, that he wanted her dead to marry someone younger. She had files, threats to expose certain financial arrangements. Your father couldn't let that happen." Elena spotted a checkbook on the corner of the desk. The top check was written out to V. Petrov. The amount made her breath catch. $50,000. The 4 line on the check read, "Debt Recovery Services." "You're not protecting us," Elena said, her voice barely audible. "You're liquidating us to pay off the syndicate." Marcus stood up. He smoothed his jacket. His hand reached into his desk drawer and came out with a silver snub-nosed revolver. He pointed it at Aris's chest. The hammer cocked with a precise click. "I can't have 2 more Millers complicating the accounting. The key, Aris. Now." Aris feigned reaching for the key in his jacket, but instead grabbed a heavy brass paperweight from the edge of the desk. He hurled it at Marcus's face. Marcus ducked, and the paperweight smashed through a glass award behind him, the impact sending fragments raining down onto the leather credenza. Marcus fired. The gunshot was deafening in the enclosed space. The bullet missed Aris by inches, punching a hole in the leather upholstery of the armchair behind him. Before Marcus could fire again, Elena lunged at his arm, grabbing his wrist with both hands. She was smaller than him, weaker, but she was fueled by something that made strength irrelevant. Aris vaulted over the desk, slamming his body into Marcus. The two men tumbled backward, crashing into the credenza. Aris used his forehead to headbutt Marcus's nose. He heard the crack of breaking bone, felt the spray of blood hot against his face. The gun fell to the carpet. Elena kicked it away. She grabbed a heavy floor-to-ceiling lamp and swung the metal base in a wide arc. It connected with Marcus's ribs as he tried to rise, and Marcus collapsed in a heap on the floor, gasping for air. Aris rushed to the window. He grabbed a heavy office chair and smashed it through the glass pane. Wind and rain howled into the room. Below, just 5 feet beneath the window, was an iron fire escape platform. "Elena, jump, now!" Aris's battered Honda sat hidden in the trees outside a 10-foot chain-link fence topped with razor wire. St. Jude's Sanitarium loomed beyond the perimeter like a forgotten monument to something dark. It was a concrete block building with no windows on the ground floor. Security lights mounted on poles illuminated a parking lot that contained only 2 vehicles, both black. Aris held binoculars to his eyes, scanning the compound. In the distance, he could hear dogs barking. They sounded trained, aggressive. Elena was looking at her mother's journal again. Her fingers traced a map drawn in the back pages. The map showed a line leading to level B4, and a note written in their mother's handwriting. "The basement is where they keep the unstable ones." "This isn't a hospital, Aris. It's a black site prison. Dad's partners, they didn't just hide her. They're using her to keep the assets secret." Elena's voice was barely a whisper. "If she's coherent, if she can tell people what happened, they lose everything. The money, the company, their freedom. So they keep her sedated, keep her broken." A black sedan with a spotlight began moving slowly along the perimeter fence. The spotlight cut through the darkness, sweeping across the bushes where the Honda was hidden. Aris ducked below the dashboard, holding his breath. The beam of light sliced through the car's interior, bright enough to see dust particles floating in the air. The sedan moved on. Aris pulled a pair of heavy-duty wire cutters from his glove box. He looked at Elena. There was a smear of blood on his cheek from the office fight. He'd stopped noticing it hours ago. If we don't go in now, we never find out why she was worth keeping alive. Elena pulled a small canister of pepper spray and a sharpened screwdriver from her bag. She nodded at Aris. They both moved toward the fence. The basement corridor of St. Jude's had peeling green paint and the smell of bleach mixed with something else. Something organic and wrong. Fluorescent tubes hummed and flickered, casting the hallway in a sickly yellow-green light. They moved slowly, staying close to the wall, listening for sounds of movement. A guard in a blue uniform turned the corner ahead of them. He was reaching for the radio on his shoulder, his eyes still adjusting to the darkness of the section he'd just walked through. Aris tackled him before he could speak into the radio. Both men crashed into a metal linen cart, sending white sheets flying through the air like ghosts. The cart tipped and scattered across the floor. The radio skidded away down the hallway, and Aris heard the squelch of its static. The guard was larger and stronger than Aris. In seconds, he had maneuvered on top of him, his heavy forearm across Aris's throat, choking him. Aris's face turned purple, turned. His vision began to narrow at the edges. His hands clawed at the guard's arm, but he couldn't get leverage, couldn't create enough pressure to force him to release. Elena ran up without hesitation. She jammed the sharpened screwdriver into the guard's shoulder. The blade went deep. The guard yelled in pain and released the pressure on Aris's throat. Aris gasped for air, his lungs burning. He delivered a flurry of punches to the guard's face until the man went limp, his body sagging like a puppet with cut strings. Aris grabbed the guard's keycard from his belt, the plastic still warm from the man's body. "Go. End of the hall. Cell 402. They moved, Elena leading, Aris covering their rear. The hallway stretched in front of them, all peeling paint and shadows, and the ambient hum of security systems that didn't know to be alarmed. Elena swiped the keycard at cell 402. The heavy steel door slid open with a hydraulic hiss. A woman was sitting on a cot inside. She had gray matted hair and thin limbs that looked like they might snap if anyone touched them too hard. She was wearing a thin white shift. She was staring at a blank wall as though it contained all the secrets of the universe. "Mom, it's us. It's Elena and Aris." Sarah turned slowly. Her eyes were glassy, unfocused. She looked at Aris and screamed, a high-pitched, wordless sound of pure terror. She threw her hands up to shield her face. Aris could see the scars on her wrists where restraints had rubbed the skin raw over years of struggling. A voice spoke from the shadows of the hallway. "She was never supposed to see you again." A man in an expensive charcoal suit stepped into the light. Aris recognized him immediately. Uncle Victor, his father's business partner for the last 20 years. The man who had come to the funeral and hugged them both and told them their father was a great man. Victor was holding a tablet and looking at security footage on its screen. He was also holding a revolver. Trust is a funny thing, Aris. You trusted your father, yet he was the one who locked her in here to keep his shares of the company. Victor showed them the tablet screen. On it was a signed contract. On one side, John Miller's signature. On the other, Victor Petrov's. When your mother threatened to expose his embezzlement to the board, he had a choice. Go to prison or disappear her. He chose her. Aris stared at the contract. His world compressed into a single point and then exploded outward. You both did this. It wasn't the syndicate. It was family. Victor signaled to two armed guards who appeared behind him in the hallway. They leveled submachine guns at the siblings. Victor looked at his gold watch as though checking the time. It's time to close the Miller account for good. Aris remembered the hidden section of the journal. He noticed the red fire suppression lever on the wall, and an idea formed. Half desperation, half inspiration. He suddenly kicked a bucket of floor cleaner that had been sitting near a mop leaning against the far wall. The bucket skidded across the polished floor toward the guard's feet. The cleaner splashed and spread in a wide, slippery pool. One of the guards slipped, his feet coming out from under him. He fell hard, the submachine gun flying from his hands. Aris reached the red fire suppression lever and pulled it. Simultaneously, Elena had spotted the exposed fuse box that Aris had indicated with his eyes. She jammed her screwdriver into the metal box. A massive blue spark erupted from the junction. Electricity arced and hissed like a living thing. The lights went out instantly. Emergency red strobes began to pulse throughout the facility, casting everything in a hellish, pulsating glow. Aris grabbed Elena and Sarah by the arms, dragging them into the pitch-black service tunnel behind the cell. Gunfire erupted into the darkness behind them, bullets punching through walls and ricocheting off metal pipes. Inside the tunnel, Aris used his phone flashlight to navigate the maze. His arm was shaking so badly he could barely keep the beam steady. Sarah was whimpering but moving, her hand death-gripped on Elena's coat. Their footsteps splashed through puddles of water that had accumulated over years of leaks. The beam of light found a ladder leading up to a manhole cover. Aris climbed first, pushing the heavy iron cover up with his back. Rain poured down through the opening. They were in the parking lot, just yards from the fence line where they'd cut through earlier. They were cornered by the water. The docks stretched out behind them, shipping containers stacked like giant children's blocks, the smell of salt and oil and rust. Blue and red lights reflected off the shipping containers, washing the dock in alternating colors. Aris put his arm around Sarah. She finally looked at him, really looked at him, and whispered his name correctly. Aris. My boy. Victor dropped his gun. The weapon clattered on the asphalt. He looked at the dark water, then at the approaching police cars. He sat down on the bumper of his car as if his legs had suddenly given out. 3 days later, the morning sun cut through the windows of a safehouse apartment. Aris stood on a balcony overlooking the city. He held the mahogany watch box. He took the gold Rolex Submariner and dropped it over the railing into a trash bin far below. It landed with a hollow clatter that he couldn't hear from this height. Elena came out of the apartment, holding 2 steaming mugs of tea. She looked toward the bedroom door where Sarah was sleeping. The doctors say she'll recover, bit by bit. Aris nodded. He didn't know if they meant Sarah would recover to normal, or recover to functional, or recover to something in between. The human mind didn't work like a broken watch. You couldn't just replace a part and have it tick properly again. He opened the back of the watch box one last time. There was a small photograph he'd missed during his initial search. It was him and Elena as children, maybe 5 and 7. They were holding hands in front of a Christmas tree. On the back, written in Sarah's handwriting, "Trust only each other." The ink was slightly smudged, as if a tear had fallen on it while she was writing. Aris tore the photograph in half. The part with Sarah's face, younger Sarah, smiling Sarah, he gave to Elena. The part with the message he kept. They leaned against the railing together, looking out at the city. The morning traffic was beginning to build. People were driving to offices and shops and homes and all the places that made up normal life. None of them knew about the Millers. None of them cared. The Miller name is dead. Just us now, Aris said. Elena didn't respond. She was looking at the photograph in her hands, at the face of a woman who didn't know yet what her husband would do to her, what her brother-in-law would help him do, what her children would have to endure trying to undo it. Aris tossed the final empty mahogany box into the air. It spun, rotating slowly as it fell toward the street below. He watched it descend, getting smaller and smaller, until it disappeared into the flow of the city far beneath them. He took a long sip of his tea. The cup was still warm,